Close guard. Let's talk about one of the favorite moves of most of the beginners. Why is it so common that the beginners like the move? They don't even know how to explain, but it's actually all connected. Because to mount on someone, to take their back, you have to get some experience. But to close the guard, you don't need as much experience. And actually, close guard is the same as all the others. I'm still with my guard closed here, but I'm taking his back. All these moves are connected. Look, he's gonna take his turn. He's gonna turn. Scoot a little bit for me, please. So all the moves here are connected. You see the back, the mount, and the close guard. They're all connected, but the close guard is so much easier to get. And that's why, the guy on bottom feels safer, and it's easier for him to play, easier for him to get into the position. So that's why he likes it so much. Flavio here, he has to break my guard, like in all the other positions that we spoke, the mount and the back, before he attacking me. So I'm a step ahead of him. He has to get out of the position while I'm about to attack him. So how am I gonna make sure that the guy's gonna stay on my close guard? Because it's not just about the attacks. The attacks you will see it in the techniques. But I need to make sure that he's gonna stay there. My legs are gonna be crossed, right? It doesn't matter which side it's gonna be crossed there. His posture needs to be breaking every time he tries on standing up, right? The guy standing up, I always try to hold both of his elbows and open the elbows, you see here, to bring the guy to me. Or use my legs. Sometimes I need to use both. Every time the guy goes, stand up just a little bit, I already pull him to me. I don't let him stand up. I don't let him break. The guy holds me. I try on breaking this. I want to keep him here. Why do I need to switch the position if I'm in such predominant position? We have a lot of attacks from there because it's an easy position that you guys are going to get. We're going to do a lot of recovers to the close guard. Let's take a look at it and let's learn, because in the close guard, you will use those moves. This is my highest percentage armbar from the close guard. I concentrate on the arm that is gripping my lapels. I break his posture by pulling his elbow out and using my legs to bring him forward. As soon as he postures up, I use both of my hands to push his elbow across his body. I also turn my body at an angle. This allows me to drive his arm all the way across to the other side. Now my left hand controls his head and I pull him to me so I can make a tight grip on his armpit. I have his arm trapped and there is no way he can take it out. I position myself straight in front of him and put my foot on his hip. I move my hips away from his so I can bring my foot that is on his hips over his shoulder. Now I lock my legs the best I can over his shoulder. Both hands grip his wrist so I can control his thumb up and raising my hips to tap him out. If he stacks his weight, I will put my forearm on his face to help my other leg swing over his head and clamp down on his neck. My right foot will immediately go towards his head without crossing my feet, so I can put pressure with my thigh on his armpit to move my hip to the side of his head. Now his head is on the ground and he cannot stack on me. I will finish the armbar, squeezing my thighs together and raising my hips with his thumb up. One of the moves that I will most use in this DVD is the triangle. So it's important that you guys get all the details. And also I want to explain a few things that some people have a lot of doubt and think that they can't do a triangle. And I'll explain that anyone can be doing this move here. So let me get you on my triangle here. I have to have my thigh, the back of my thigh here, my hamstring, on his neck, right? And my calf here, putting a lot of pressure. Even if I can't lock, right, I'm still gonna do my best here to do so. Look, can't lock, I lock it there, right? The best I can. Can even have your arm here. Other thing is, the guy looking up is not good for you because he's gonna start making posture. So it's good to control the head, but when you control the head, don't pull down. Because you pull down, you messed up on the move. Because now I'm not actually applying any pressure on him. You can relax. I'm not actually applying any pressure on him because his chin is going towards his chest. So it's important that I'm turning his head to this side. You see here, always towards my hamstring there. Because now he gets choked on his throat. You see how it's tight there? If I really wanted to, it would have the pressure here. Look, right? So I don't never want to do this. Always want to turn it to this side here before applying the pressure. So then I tried to lock, I couldn't, right? I did my best here to lock my triangle. I want to have this arm going to the other side there, right? But the guy's not going to let me do this. So it's important that this is very tight so I can lift my hip up without worrying of him taking this arm out. Because I really need to lift my hip all the way. Because look what happens here when I lift. His arms go to this side, right? So now I'm going to lift my hip and go with both of my hands, making a frame, one in the elbow and one in the triceps. Don't go in the forearm, otherwise you're not gonna be able, you see, to push it tight to him. He's still too strong to open his arm. But if you're here, you're stronger than him. Then I'm switching this, and look how I'm pushing all the way towards him, moving my body to the side. Because I want him to land with the elbow outside of my hip. And I want to pull him right away. Look, I want to pull him back and control my leg here, trapping his arm. So please take your arm out there. He moves his body, but his arm keeps sticking out. Look how his elbow is still there. You see? Then I'm going to adjust my hip again, my lock again. Of course, I could. You can put your foot here, adjust it tighter. Right? But let's say I can't lock my legs, you know. My hand is going to come over here. And it's not just coming here. It needs to be very tight to his ear. You see, because my arm is going to use it as an extra leg. You see here? And this arm is going to come over. If you can, of course, all the way with the elbow joint on the knee. It's not everybody that is that flexible, so I'm just going to go all the way here. Locking my elbows, you see here? Very tight to the guy. So both, one here, one there. And now I can start having the pressure of his arm and of his chin looking to this side here. Lifting my hip up, not all the way, but just a little bit, and pulling it down. My knee squeezing on the side of his neck. He's a little bit purple, but that's fine, right? So I can tap him out. So just a little bit quicker. Here now me closing this triangle. You know, if you can, boom, lock. Look how my hip go up. I start moving. This hand goes here, then I switch, I push. Look how I bring him to my side and start scooting. I'm pulling him all the way so he doesn't take the arm out. He's locked in the position. My hand is already positioned there. I'm already going all the way here to open, escape my hip to lock the best I can. Then this hand's gonna come here. I'm gonna hold, and I'm gonna make sure that my hip is gonna come up as I pull him down. Now you know how to close your triangle and finish anyone. When your partner grips with both hands at the belt, try this attack. His elbows are tight to his body, and it's difficult to open them to break his posture. Instead of fighting him, I'm going to grip both of his sleeves at the wrist. I open my guard and escape my hips to one side. My knee comes up, and I trap his arm with the lower part of my shin. Then, I push my knee all the way across his belly. I keep his wrist pinned as my leg slides up and over the back of his neck to lock the triangle. Now I need to move his arm to the opposite side. I bridge back onto my shoulders and lift my hips high. Now I use both hands on the back of his bicep to push his bicep towards his chin. Now I pull him to me with my legs and make sure his arm is strapped tight against my stomach. I can begin to make the adjustments to tighten the triangle. With my outside arm, I trap his arm and grab my knee. I reach all the way around with my outside knee with one hand and around his head with the other hand. Now I squeeze everything together and lift my hips to get the tap. My partner stands up in my close guard while pushing down on my biceps. Immediately, I grab both of his ankles and open my guard, letting my hips drop down. I keep my legs squeezed as my knees are pinching together. Now I pull on his ankle as I push into him with my legs. When he falls, it's very important that I control his heels so he can't come back on top. I have my elbow posted on the mat. I release his other ankle and post my other hand back behind me. You can see my shoulder now face down towards the mat. I can push and rotate my hips towards him using my hands to come on top. I keep scooting back until I end in the mount or take his back. So I set this sweep up just like the previous technique. I sweep him and immediately control both of his ankles to prevent him from escaping. This time, he reaches across and tries to push me back to keep me from moving to the top position. I'm going to reach over his arm on the same side and pulse my other hand on the mat. Now I lift my hips up, deep into his armpit, as I rotate to my side and throw my leg over his head. I continue to rotate, keeping his arm trapped, with my arm near the elbow. I reach across and grab his pants as I straighten his arm. I use the grip on his pants and lap my leg that is hooked under his chin to roll him over. I finish in good position, controlling his wrist with both of my hands. Now I squeeze my knees together as I lift my hips to get the tap. My partner begins to control my arm. As soon as he grabs my sleeve, I grab his opposite sleeve like this. As he stands up, I underhook his leg with my free hand and pull myself tight to his leg. Now look how I switch my grip to the same hand that is underhooking his leg. I open my guard and swing my outside leg while the other leg hooks over his arm. I apply pressure with the leg over his arm to drive him to the mat. I switch the grip on his sleeve to my other hand and grab his knee. As soon as I grab his knee, I sit up and reach across his lower back to grab his waist. Now I use the hand on his knee to block him as I pull with the other hand and scoop my hips out until he falls. I drive all my weight towards his hips to keep him from escaping and lean forward to apply the omoplata. As my partner stands up, I reach across and break his grip by grabbing his palm and rotating it open. Just like in the previous technique, I'll underhook the leg. Now I use my hand to post on the mat near my head. Notice my palm is down with the fingers facing forward. I lift my hip up and drive it toward his knee. At the same time, I use my elbow joint to pull his ankle and continue to drive toward that side. As he falls back, I post both of my hands on the mat close to the outside of his legs, shoulder facing down. I push and rotate my hips back over the top and to the side of him to end in mount. I reach across and grab his sleeve and pass it to the other hand. So I'm now grabbing his sleeve on the same side. I underhook his other leg and get him out of base by lifting my hip up and driving it toward his knee, with my guard still closed. This time, he's going to try to come on top by posting his hand on the mat. This creates enough space for me to pull my leg out and close the triangle. Now I can release his leg and start to adjust everything up the same way I demonstrate in the triangle details video. I'm gonna be trying to demonstrate a little bit of the Kimura setup because I'm gonna be using a lot of this setup here in the close guard for the techniques. So there's a few ways I can do this, right? One way I can push the arm here. Another way I can rotate the arm and catch it and pin it to my hip. Very important that it's very tight there. Another way I can push, I rotate, but the guy rotates back again. I open his elbows. And when he comes back, I pin it again. Before I do that, if the guy pulls that hand on the mat, I cannot have the hand go to my hip. So it's important that my hip goes to the hand. Or I start all over, right? So I get to the point here. Look, my hip goes there, so I can open his elbow here with my leg. And you can use the help of this hand here as well. Right, to get tight here. Now I want to pin my hand on the top of my knee here. It can be in your shin, depends where your elbow lands. So it's actually you're aiming with the elbow here and grabbing wherever. Pulling this and making sure that your elbow is pushing down the whole time. So the guy doesn't posture. Posture back, posture back. Look, he postured, but his arm stays there. So look, I just have to move my elbow into the mat. Look here. Now his arm comes up, and I can easily make the lock. Right, once again, make the posture very high this time. You see, my foot is straight, not here, otherwise I'm losing him. Right, I want to have my foot straight, even if it's not on the hip, at least it should be straightened. With this here, go ahead, posture. You see here? Then this always pulling, so I can make sure that I'm doing that and not coming all the way high and have him posture and defend his arm before. I'm gonna be using this here to set it up my attacks from close guard. To apply a Kimura, you shouldn't sit up, otherwise your opponent will easily defend by posturing up and straightening his arm. My partner is in my close guard and has good posture. I'm going to take both of my hands and bring them together underneath his arm almost like a praying position. Then I'm going to grab one of his wrists and pin it to my thigh. I don't want to let him post it on the mat because it will be difficult for me to move it. Now, instead of sitting up to reach over his arm for the Kimura, I'm going to bring my knee straight up to me to bring his arm to me. With my other hand, I reach and grab my leg just below the knee, so he doesn't posture back up. I concentrate all my weight on my elbow around his back in case he tries to posture back up. Now my body crunches a little to the side as I put my elbow right next to my hip. In a quick motion, I kick my leg straight back and reach over the top of his arm to grab my own wrist and lock the Kimura. Now I throw my leg over his wrist and across his back and start to escape my hip. I continue to escape my hips until I am on my side so he cannot regain his posture. I also need to be pulling his hips to mine using both of my heels. Sometimes he will tap just by doing so. If not, I'll finish by slowly rolling his wrist toward his shoulder. Notice that my Kimura grips never got looser. This move starts with the same Kimura setup. I pin his wrist to my hip and bring my knee straight up and reach over the top to grab my own leg to control the shoulder. I drop my elbow down to the mat and kick my leg straight back to grab my wrist to lock the Kimura. This time, my partner reaches under his thigh and grabs his gi to prevent me from finishing the technique. I kick my leg to push his hips backwards. At the same time, I pull his arm straight out by pulling his elbow towards me. Now I escape my hip out to the side to break his grip so I can finish just like the previous technique. I control his wrist and pin it to my hip. I bring my leg up to drive him forward and reach through to grab the Kimura. My opponent grabs under his thigh to defend the Kimura, and I can't get his arm out. I post my hand on the mat, and my other hand keeps control of his wrist. Now I pinch my knees together and drive my hips up and forward into him as I rotate to the side of his trapped arm. I sweep him to end in the mount position. This time, my partner postures up, so now I'm going to move to my third attack. I pull my arm out and go across the back of his neck and use my elbow to drive his head down. I escape my hip out to the opposite side. I rotate my arm around his head and underneath his neck. I like to cup his chin with my entire hand so my fingers are actually on his cheek. Now my other hand goes underneath his armpit and reaches to grip the other hand in a monkey grip. You can see it here. I move my hips directly back underneath him. I want to always keep my head up off the mat because if I put my head on the mat, I'm giving him room to escape his head. I can use that same foot to push on his knee and get him out of balance, falling even deeper inside my choke. I start to lift my hip up to get the tap. This technique I have done numerous times, in my weight and also in the absolute. Once again, same setup as the previous technique. You can start to see how many options you have of the same setup. This time my partner defends the guillotine by controlling my wrist and preventing the choke. Now I escape my hip all the way out to the same side he's controlling my wrist, so his elbow don't reach the ground and stop my leg. I can easily free my leg and throw it up and over his defending arm. Now I push his shoulder with my leg and take my arm out. I lock the triangle and finish as I demonstrate in the triangle detail video. This is one of my favorite no-gi sweeps that works on the gi as well. I'm having trouble controlling his wrist, so I sit up to attack the kimura. This time I bring my armpit all the way across the back of his neck to pin his head down. I escape my hips so I can try to get the guillotine. But sometimes there is not enough room to get your arm in, so I bring my leg up and wrap my arm around my thigh. I escape my hips a bit more to the side so I can create room to put my hook in. I trap his wrist on the other side and chop his leg in. I use my hook on the other side to sweep him and end in mount. Make sure to hold your grips until you are on top to prevent him from taking your back. I grip his sleeve, and with my opposite hand, I go under his wrist. I pull up with both my hands, and at the same time, I use my legs to bring him forward and break his grip. I keep the grip on his sleeve and move my body to the side so I can reach deep over his arm near the shoulder. I can now reach through and grab his collar as I put my shoulders back on the mat. I let go of his sleeve now and use the other hand to help adjust the grip. For these first moves, I don't need to have a deep grip on his lapel, but it will work fine either way. With my other arm, I underhook his leg. I want to continue to pull my head very tight to his knee. I wing my hips out, once, twice, or 3 times. Whatever you need to get the angle so I'm perpendicular to him. To get the sweep, make sure you swing your legs towards his head, not towards his opposite side. When I come up on top, I want to be in this position here with control of his arm so I am set up to attack. This happened to be one of the moves I most do from close guard. I control his posture and break his grip just like the previous technique. This time, he improves his base by stepping up and posturing up, preventing the sweep. I release the grip on his collar and grip behind his tricep. This helps straighten his arm. I swing my leg out and hook his neck. I can get the tap here by lifting my hips. Okay, let's look at a different way to overhook your opponent's arm. This time, I'm going to reach up and under his arm and grip his tricep. With my other hand, I grip the back of his neck and pull him to me. As he sits up, I sit up with him. I try to pull down as I walk my arm towards the back of his arm. I close his elbow inside my body to break his grip. I reach under his arm and grab his collar. This time, when I use my other hand to adjust my grip, I want to reach deep and tight into his collar. Now I use my hand to push on his shoulder as I escape my hip to the outside. I post my foot on his hip to keep him from moving to that side. With my other hand, I reach over his shoulder and grab as much of the material on the back of his gi. I pull the material until my wrist is on his neck and then do the most important detail of this move. I must turn my wrist until my thumb is facing up. Now, I lock my elbow down underneath him to prevent him from pushing me. I'm going to apply the choke by using my leg to push away from him. The further I push away, the tighter the choke gets until he taps. I use the same method as the previous technique to overhook his arm. I reach under his arm and deep and tight into his collar. So I grab as much of material on the back of his gi and tuck my elbow underneath. This time, as I try to escape my hip to the outside, he follows me, and I can't create the distance to get the last choke. With the blade of my arm, I go under and lift his chin the highest possible while I pull on the collar to get the choke. This is a triangle setup that can be used in many different occasions. I use the same method as the previous technique to overhook his arm. This time, as I try to apply the choke, my opponent pushes my arm back in to take pressure off the choke. As soon as I see him push down on my elbow, I bring my leg over his arm. I keep the grip on his back while I lock the triangle. To finish the triangle, I bridge back onto my shoulders and lift my hips high. I use both of my hands on the back of his arm to push his arm across to the other side. I pull him to me with my legs and make sure his arm is trapped tight against my stomach. Now I can begin to make the adjustment to tighten the triangle. With my outside arm, I trap his arm and grab my knee. With the other hand, I grab my shin and post my foot on his hip to adjust my angle, so I can make the triangle tighter. I reach all the way around my outside knee with one hand and around his head with the other hand. Now I squeeze everything together and lift my hips to get the tap. I grip his sleeve and with my opposite hand, I go under his wrist. I pull up with both my hands and at the same time, use my legs to bring him forward and break his grip. I keep the grip on his sleeve and move my body to the side, so I can reach deep over his arm near the shoulder. I can now reach through and grab his collar as I put my shoulders back on the mat. I release the grip on his lapel and grip across his bicep. With the other hand, I push his elbow in, across my body, and grip across his tricep to hold his arm in place. I place my foot on his hip and use it to get the angle to pass my leg over his shoulder and lock my leg as tight as possible. Without his overhooked arm, he cannot defend. I could still bring my other leg over his head and clamp down on his neck. Now I move the back of my leg inside his armpit and my hips to the side of his head so I can finish the armbar, controlling his wrist with a thumb up, squeezing my knees together and lifting my hips. I did this move a couple of times at the 2011 Worlds. I reach under his arm and dip and tight into his collar. I have the overhook, but he has his elbow on the mat on one side and his arm tied to me on the other. So I hold his wrist and hip escape all the way back underneath him. I pull my knee out as far as I can. He's still trapping my leg. I continue to escape my hips. Now I kick up, almost like I'm sweeping him. As he tries to recover, I keep my arm straightened and bring my foot inside and under his arm to attack the triangle. I release the grip on his lapel and lock the triangle. Now I finish the exact same way as I described in the triangle detail video. This is a move that I developed by myself as a blue belt and haven't changed much. The first time competing at the Worlds, in 2003, I submitted 4 opponents with the same move. This time I reach under his arm on one side and around his neck on the other. I pull him down to me and control his posture. I reach underneath to get the underhook and control his collar. My opponent tries to make posture and project his body to the outside, trying to rotate his arm and take it out. I post my elbow on the ground, and in one motion, I release his collar, sliding my grip to his elbow. At the same time, I'm lifting my hip up and towards his hips. I rotate my hips to bring my knee around and over his shoulder, and my foot is hooking the back of his neck. It's important to know that you can only do that if your other foot is on your tiptoes and the leg is straightened to use the back part of it, knee and hamstring, to push his body up and create space for the other leg. With his arm still trapped under my arm and my knees together, he has no escape and must tap. This is also one of my favorite no-gi moves from close guard. I reach under his arm on one side and around his neck on the other. I pull him down to me, I reach over his arm and underhook my leg to trap his arm. Now I grab the back of his collar. If I need to, I can use the other hand to adjust the grip. I push on his bicep and hip out as I bring my knee in under his other arm and escape my hip. The more I escape to the side, the more I can drive his head down. I loop my shin in front of his face. I take my hand out as I escape my hip away from him. I block his knee with one hand, and the other hand reaches across his body to grab his hip. I continue to hip away from him, towards his head to break his posture. Now I can sit up with all my weight near his hips so he doesn't posture back up. I will continue on driving my body forward, pushing on his hips until he taps.